Hello to this episode of the podcast, and I got the fantastic, the amazing mind reader who you know from Banachek and Max, Banachek.
Good to be here, my friend. Sounds like there should be music with that introduction.
There should be. Should make myself a little theme tune thing.
It should, yeah. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, there you go.
Now, I'm just wondering, how did you start getting into magic?
Yeah, well, that actually started quite by accident. I didn't plan on getting magic. I did. Oh boy, it's a long story. All right, so let's try to tell some of it. Let's see. Let's go back to when I was a kid. I guess I'll start out from when I was real little, when I was a little baby. My mom and dad divorced when I was a year old. She immigrated back to the UK. Middlesex is where I lived up there, Hayes area. And she remarried a Scotsman, had two kids. We immigrated to South Africa. My mom abandoned me while we were in South Africa with my two brothers, a year and 3 years old. But stepfather was there, but we only saw him on Sundays. Maybe he was an alcoholic, so we barely ever saw him. So I was left raising my two siblings. I was changing diapers. I was bottle feeding, doing all that at 9. And then in 1974, there was a gentleman by the name of Uri Geller, a very famous psychic. You guys know him over the UK because he ended up doing a lot more in the UK. And he was the first man that claimed that he could actually bend metal objects with his mind. Well, Aaron Steed, who was the producer of Springbok Radio, we didn't have television in South Africa at that time yet. We had TVs, but no TV station yet. He said that Geller was going to be on the radio, and that Geller said that if you bring metal objects to the radio, you too can get them to bend with your mind. And so, I mean, in my circumstances, why would I not want to be able to do something like that, something grander, right? And why would I not want to convince my siblings that I had these powers? So I walked around the house. I found a little needle that my mom had left when she abandoned us in a sewing kit, and I took it to the radio, concentrated on it. And I believed in my mind that I had got that pin, that needle to actually bend minutely, but I believe on a micro level, but I believed I got it to bend. And it wasn't until that I left there in 1969 to find that 1969 is when I moved to South Africa. 1975, I moved to Australia to be with my biological dad. We moved to Colorado, and it was in a bookstore, secondhand bookstore. I picked up a book by James the Amazing Randi. And it was called The Magic of Uri Geller, later to be changed to The Truth of Uri Geller. And the truth, as Randi put it, was that Geller was nothing more than a magician posing as a psychic. Nobody had ever told me this before. Nobody ever told me there were people conning people using magic tricks. And so I was a little bit upset at myself because I had believed, because all the adults around believed me, and I learned a valuable lesson in that moment. I learned that just because people are in a position of authority doesn't always make them correct. So from that book, there was a method to bend a nail and a method to bend a key. So I started doing that. Then I started creating my own methods for bending metal objects because I'd never seen Geller perform. I just heard that when you watch Geller perform, when he bends a fork or a spoon, you see it bending. When I did finally get to see Geller perform, that was not the case. That was the case with the nails because it was an optical illusion in the keys. But usually with the metal, it was like he'd bring a bunch of kids over and they would cover it with their hands. And when they took their hands away, it was bent. You could see the ones that were breaking, of course, but that was different. So I didn't know. So I just created these superior bends that even I've heard, well, I know that Geller even uses now. So I had written, when I was in high school, I started doing all this, and all the kids were stealing all the silverware from the cafeteria to bring it to me to bend. I got in trouble for that, even though it wasn't me doing it. I figured a way to short the wires so I could get the school bell go off early. I told everybody I was doing it psychically. And then it was a policeman asked me to bend a key. And I said, give me a key that doesn't mean anything to you. And I guess he didn't think that I could do it. And he gave me the key to his patrol car. And I bent it, and he had to call in to get some other people to bring keys to him so that he could actually drive his patrol car away. Got a little cocky, wrote Randi a letter, said, if you ever need a kid to fool scientists into believing this stuff is real, I'd be happy to do it. Didn't expect to hear back. Randy wrote back and said, "Hey, if you're ever in the area, come visit." Well, I made sure that I was in the area at one time, and he lived in New Jersey, and it was an incredible house. Like it was just exactly what you would think a wizard would have, right? You walk up to it, and there's a big old knocker on the front door. The door doesn't open from the side where the hinges are. It opens on the opposite side. So and you use a magnet to move a bolt across it. So underneath the rock, you walk in the house and clocks are going backwards instead of forwards. He's got big macaws, he's got doves, it's just a magician's house. And the whole time I was there, he never asked to see anything. So when I left, I was very disappointed. But I was to find out years later that if the opportunity ever came for me to fool scientists, he wanted to be able to tell them that he never taught me anything, that I taught myself. Can you imagine what it had been like if the amazing Randy had taught me? And I think back now, if Randy had taught me, I would have looked more like a magician because he was a magician and very good at what he did. But I looked more like a psychic when I was performing. And the opportunity came about. McDonnell Douglas gave $500,000 to Washington University in 1979 or 80, I think it was, something like that. And then I went in for 4 years, convinced scientists I was a genuine psychic, only to come out after 4 years and explain it was all a hoax. It's called Project Alpha. You can find it online. There's a great podcast by Brian Brushwood. Brian Brushwood, a fellow magician who has gone off and done great things. And it's called The World's Greatest Con, Season 3. So if you want to know more about Project Alpha, go look that up. It is fantastic, not because it's about me, but just because the way he tells the story and sets it up. It's really, really, truly amazing. So anyway, that's kind of how I got started. I didn't even know there was a subcategory of magic called mentalism. I just knew that there were people conning people using magic tricks.
And of course, you do live shows, and live shows are all about the live experiences. What are some brilliant experiences that you've had with people reacting to your magic tricks? Like any standout reactions?
I've done this for so long. I mean, I've been doing this since 1976. So I've had it all happen. I've had people running out of the room screaming. I had one. I did a voodoo routine one time where somebody starts to bleed. Their hand starts bleeding when I'm piercing the hand of a voodoo doll, and found out they went to the hospital to go get checked, even though it was a magic trick. I had a religious person throw a huge Bible, the biggest Bible I've ever seen, throw it at me in the middle of a show, and I just looked and fell to the floor. I said, "Are you happy now?" I've just had so many experiences. As you ask me questions, you'll find out I don't have any favorites. If you were to say, what's your favorite this or favorite that, I just don't have any favorites. I'm so eclectic when it comes to music. When I had an iPod, I had over 10,000 songs from classical all the way to heavy metal, because it just always depends in the mood that I'm in. Even when it came to food for a long time, I had no favorites. I do have a favorite now, prime rib. But that's about the only favorite thing that I have in this world. When I was a kid, people would say, "What's your favorite color?" And I'd go, I don't have one. And they'd make fun of me because I didn't have a favorite color. So one day I said, "Oh, it's orange." So I bought orange tennis shoes and an orange shirt and wore that. And I looked like an idiot. And I was like, this is just stupid. I'm trying to please other people. And I don't try to please other people. So I don't know. If you ask me today, which you just did, I'll give you one answer. If you ask me tomorrow, it'll be a different answer. If you ask me another day, it'll be a different answer. A lot of time, it depends on my environment. I mean, when I was at the Stratosphere in Las Vegas, not allowed to call it the Stratosphere anymore. It's at least marketing. That's what they say to me. But I had a show there for 3.5 years. I did 837 shows. It was an 850-seat theater. And something that stood out to me, there was a moment in the show where I'd bring a kid up and I make the kid the star. They get to bend metal in their hands. And a couple of times I'd bring really, heavily autistic children up who normally don't get picked for anything like that. And parents would always reach out to me later and say, "Thank you for doing that. It's changed the way that, I've seen a huge change in my child as a result." And after one show, there was this one little girl, and she came up and she gave me her sock. She had one sock on and the other sock off, and she handed me the sock. And she wanted me to have the sock. And I looked at the parents. I go, "That's what she wants. Take the sock." And what it was is that sock was the most precious thing that that child had, and that child wanted me to have that sock because I had brought them up on stage and made them a star. And so that sock hung in my dressing room for a very long time. And people go, what is that little tiny nasty sock doing there? And I go, no, it's not a nasty sock, it's a very special sock, and it has a lot of meaning.
And of course, you performed at the Black Magic Convention with your lecture and your show in the evening. Was it scary performing to magicians, or were you like, because you've done so many shows, it was a bit easier?
Um, so here's the interesting thing. I don't perform for magicians. I don't work for magicians. I work for the public. There are magicians that do that and they do it very, very well. You know, they're good at it and they love doing conventions. They love working those things. I'm not really fond of doing conventions. I mean, I like being around other magicians in those environments. And I often feel like I need to give back to the community that's actually given me a career in a way. So that's one of the reasons I do the conventions. Some I've had conventions in the past where I've been a little bit nervous because magicians can be very, very judgmental, you know. And even in my shows, like at the Strat, I could always tell when there was a magician in the audience because they're like this with their arms folded, and it's not cold, and they're just staring, or they're taking notes, or they're whispering. And quite often, I would turn to them and go, "Are you a magician?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "Yep." I can always tell because they're whispering in the middle of the show. They're very distracting. Um, but at Blackpool, I don't know. I've done Blackpool before. I wasn't nervous at all. It was. I'm at the point in my life. I'm the Muppets up in the balcony. I'm Mortimer up in the balcony. I just don't give an F anymore. It's like I don't care what people think anymore. I just do my thing. I've been doing it so long. I know I get standing ovations with my show. So if I have a show that's not getting that, it's something else that's going on. It's not the effects. It's not what I'm my performance. It's there's just something else in that moment in that particular environment. And tomorrow is another day. So when I went to Blackpool this time, first time I went to Blackpool, yeah, I was very nervous. I did it 15 years ago, I think it was. But this time, no, not at all. I'm just doing a show that I've done for a very, very long time. They'll love it, they'll hate it. But if they hated it, I'm going back out and, you know, I'm working for the public who loves it tomorrow. So
And of course, like I said, you perform live. Do you think it's like easier to fool an audience from like 20 years ago from now because people have been exposed to magic and they might know some secrets, or do you think it's about the same?
hmm, I think it's actually a little harder now because people do have the internet, and magicians are constantly exposing magic on the internet. So people are very skeptical and they're trying to figure it out. There was a time back in the 80s and 90s when I was performing in comedy clubs. And those were the days that Sam Kinison was coming up, Stephen Wright, and I knew those guys back then. And there was a certain type of comedian that would get up on stage, and his whole act was basically heckling the audience and having the audience heckle him. And there were quite a few comedians that did that. So they sort of trained the audience into heckling. So the moment I would come out, they'd try to heckle me. So I'd be there because I was always headlining, and I'd watch the first act and the middle act. And if they were heckling them, I would come out and I'd say, look, I've got a set performance for you. I can either do the incredible performance that I want to perform for you and give you my best presentation, or we can have a battle of wits. You've already done the battle of wits with the other comedians. Which would you like to see? Would you like to see a battle of wits, or would you like to see a performance? And, you know, I'd get big cheers on the performance. So if somebody did start to give me a hard time, I could say, look, as I said to you earlier, you know, I'm trying to do a performance here. How many of you would like this person to? And sorry, I look down and I see how young you are when I use that word. I do apologize. So yeah,
That's fine.
and shut the f up, you know. And everybody would cheer, you know. And then if that person kept heckling, they got kicked out. So my point on that was we had trained audiences, not me, but other comedians had trained audiences to heckle. So I think we're almost in this environment now where magicians buy stuff and then they expose it online because that's how they get views and that's how they make money hurting magic. Um, that we have almost trained people to try to look for the trick now rather than just sit back and enjoy it. It also depends on your environment where you're working. You know, I work a lot of cruise ships, I work a lot of casinos, I do a lot of corporate. Depending on the environment and The type of people that are there, it can either be they're trying to figure it out or they're trying to just enjoy it. Now that's why if you saw me at Blackpool, I come out and I hit really really hard in the beginning. I hit with cards, and basically I say if I was to ask everyone to think of a playing card, you might think Ace of Spades, Queen of Hearts. Those are psychological. Probably don't want to think of those cards. You can if you want to. Need everybody to think of a playing card. Let me get a few people, and I get 4 people to stand up. There are no playing cards involved other than in their thoughts. And then from their body language, supposedly I reveal what they're playing cards. It hits hard, and people go, "Oh, geez, okay, this guy's good. We need to pay attention." And then I'll have a few things that there's no way they can figure out, so they kind of give up. Which brings me to an important thing in performing. Sometimes the placement of your effects, what will make the effect work. There's a trick called key rect. Do you know it?
No, I don't.
Okay, so key rect is a trick. It's been around for a long, long, long time. It's a lock, and it's you got like five. I can't remember how many keys. Maybe 7. I think I only used 5, but 7 keys. And they try all the keys, but the last key that goes into the lock unlocks the lock, but it also unlocks the lock, so all the other keys will open the lock. So they can pick any key, and that'll be the key that actually opens the lock, right? So it's a gimmick lock with a special key that makes it open for all the other keys. And back in my early days, I would perform a very risque, because it was comedy clubs, key rect routine. And I'm not going to say the name of it, but anyway, the idea was this: that the lady would put her hands in God's pocket and take out one key, you know, and I'd go, nope, that doesn't open it. Next key, nope, that doesn't open it. And then finally there'd be a key that would open it. And I'd say, I think that's it. And then they would try it, and it would actually open the lock. I found that if I put that trick second or third in the routine, in my routine for that night, audiences were trying to figure it out. And they're thinking, oh, it might be a trick lock or something like that. But if I put it much later, after I've done like a Q&A routine, after I've done my card routine, after I've done all these things where people like, I give up. Now they enjoyed it for the jokes, because there was a lot of jokes in that routine that weren't getting the laughs they should have got, because that routine was at the beginning originally, and they were too busy trying to figure out. So once I moved it further down, it now played for the laughs, because they had just given up trying to figure anything out.
And what is one magic skill that's not really related into magic but helped you out with your performance side?
I don't know. One skill. I've been doing this since I was very, I don't know. Because I was abandoned in South Africa, I think I'm a troubleshooter. I'm more of a troubleshooter than anything else. And I think that comes from having to find unique ways to put food on the table for my brothers without stealing, if possible. And to put clothes on them. And I always had to create new games. Even when I played soccer when I was a kid, I was always coming up with brand new moves to get the ball around somebody or through the legs. So I've always been a troubleshooter. When I worked with Chris Angel, we would have to sit in a room and come up with 250 to 350 tricks every season. And we did that in 2 weeks. And then we took a week off, and it became my job and a couple other people's jobs to try to figure out how are we going to accomplish all those 250 to 350 tricks. Because the hardest part for a TV show or anything like that is coming up with concepts, ideas of what we want to do. The methods are the easy part for me. I can come up with 3. You give me something you want to do, I can come up with 2, 3 methods for actually doing that and accomplishing it, depending on the different environments that we're working in as well. So being a troubleshooter comes from my childhood of always having to make things work, in order to actually live. So that's really a skill that I had that most people wouldn't think of it as a skill, but it is a skill, to be able to think outside the box and not within the box itself, but also to include thinking that is inside the box, to be able to take that outside the box. I know that sounds confusing, but if you think about it, it actually does make sense. So yeah, so I didn't get any training in anything else. I got real life training, and troubleshooting is my skill, I guess.
What what is like the hardest type of audience to perform to? Is it more like kids? Is it more adults? Is it teenagers? What is like the hardest like audience without heckling, basically?
Yeah, that again, that's a hard question to answer for me because I do realize that you have to perform differently for different types of groups. If you're trying to do the same exact routines in the exact same way and trying to get the exact same responses from different types of groups that you perform for, it's not going to happen. And that's something that's come naturally to me to a point. My daughter, she's 30 some years old, and she asked me to perform at her daughter's, my granddaughter's school. She said, "Yeah, I'm the school mom for this week, and I've got to coordinate different events. Dad, would you come and do a performance?" And these were young kids. I said, Kelly, I don't perform for young kids. That's a special talent. I admire people that can do that greatly and they do it well. And she's like, Dad, you just make a coin disappear. You do magic, just do a few things like that. It'll be fine. I go, Kelly, that's not what I do. I could do it, but I'm not going to give you the best performance. And so I called a friend of mine, Jamie Salinas. He's fairly well known in the magic community now. And I said, Jamie, yeah, you do kids shows. Would you mind coming doing this? I'll pay you. He said, you don't have to pay me. I'll just come do it. So he came and he was up there and he's up there for 5 minutes and he's got the kids in control. He's got them, directing them, misdirecting them. And it wasn't even 5 minutes into the performance when my daughter turned to me, yeah, Dad, you would have sucked because she got it. She got it in that moment. Each one of these areas, it's a special skill. So I don't perform for kids. So I don't put myself within that environment because I know that is a very, very special skill. I always find it interesting when magicians put other magicians down because of the audiences they work for. It's like an illusionist, that do big shows will look down on sometimes if they don't do kid shows, but they're just doing always corporate gigs. They look down on kid performers. I'm sorry, that's a very special skill to be able to control those kids. And other magicians will look down on street performers, and that's a very special skill that you have to get to be able to draw a crowd on a street. And I look up to every single one of those performers because I know what they've been through. I've known the lessons, I've known the ups and downs that they've had to go through to become as good as they are in those environments.
And what is one thing that magicians keep saying about mentalists that isn't true? And what is it that you like to stop that people are like saying that it's not really true, but people think it is?
It depends. I think sometimes we do that to ourselves as mentalists in a way. It's here's the thing that brings us to disclaimers, doesn't it? I think. So I'm going to take this question in a different way, if that's okay.
Okay.
Um, so when I came out, nobody was really putting a disclaimer when they were doing mentalism. The majority of people wanted people to think that they were actually psychic. And that sort of came from I think in their early days of performing, they weren't very good at performing mentalism. So they needed people to believe in psychic phenomena so that they weren't looking for the trick. And then there came a point where they became really, really good, but they've been doing it so long that they still wanted people to think that they were a real psychic. Now, if you're a psychic, you would call yourself a psychic. You would not call yourself a mentalist. A mentalist simply means that you are using tricks to simulate what psychic phenomena wouldn't look like. So Ned Rutledge had this great one-off lecture that he did. Ned Rutledge was a mentalist. He was more of a professor, but he had created some great mentalism tricks. And in it, he said he takes his five known senses to create the illusion of a sixth sense. And Randy brought this to me at one point because I said, Randy, I'm not comfortable telling people I'm a psychic. I want to go for a psychological approach. And so he pointed that out to me. So I called up Ned and I said, Ned, I love this. Can I use it? He says, well, I've only used it one time for one lecture that I did. Yeah. So I put it in my books and I started running with it. And then there was a bunch of mentalists that said, well, there was one very specific mentalist that said there's no place for a fake mind reader. And I was being real successful in the college market. I was taking College Entertainer of the Year 2 years in a row, Novelty Entertainer of the Year. And they're like, well, Banachek's the exception. I'm like, if I'm the exception, other people can do it as well. So I was saying that I take my five known senses. I use verbal communication, nonverbal communication, magic, psychology, mix it all together to create a show. And that is true. I mean, I do have some routines that rely solely on psychology, but I'm also emphasizing the word magic inside there. So I started doing that, and then other people started to adopt it, and then Darren Brown took the psychological approach. The problem with Darren when he started out, and Darren's fantastic. The problem with Darren when he started out was he was saying it was all NLP. He really pushed the NLP side. And the problem with that, a lie is a lie is a lie. And if you lie, somebody has the right to call you out on your lie. So if you're saying you're psychic, somebody has a right to expose your tricks. If you're saying it's all NLP, somebody has the right to expose your tricks and say, this is not NLP. This is how this trick is done. So when you do that, when you lie like that, and that's a choice you have to make, but when you lie like that and you get caught, and when they start exposing your tricks, you're not just hurting yourself. You are now hurting every other honest mentalist out there that is telling people that, hey, this is not real. I'm not a genuine psychic. And there's a thrill for me, in a way, telling the audience that I'm not a genuine psychic, that I simulate what psychic phenomena will look like if it was genuine, then performing, people thinking it's real, and then having to remind them again that it's not. And it takes a certain kind of skill for that to be able to get to that point. And my manager used to always say, you know, in the beginning, he said when he took me on, he didn't like the idea of me telling the audience that this is not real. But then he started seeing me perform, and he went, "Oh, I get it now, right?" Because here's the thing: magicians, if you're performing as a magician on stage, you have a contract with your audience. You have an unspoken contract that you are going to fool them. They come to your show knowing it's a trick. But when they come to see a mentalist, many people have no idea if it's a trick or if it's not a trick. And you become the authoritative figure on what it is that you're doing. And if you tell them it's psychic or NLP and they don't have an explanation, that is what they're going to believe. I know that there's a certain amount of people that are going to come to my show. They're not going to believe no matter what I was to do or say. They're not going to believe. They might just enjoy the entertainment value of it, but they're not going to believe. There's also a large portion that's going to come and they're going to believe no matter what I say. Even if I say that this is not real, even if I showed them how it was done, they're still going to go, oh yeah, but he's lying about all the other stuff. This is real. But there's also a much larger section of the audience that come and they've never seen a mentalist before. So again, I become the authoritative figure. My job is to entertain. My job isn't to change people's belief systems. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to have you come in here, walk away with your belief system intact, whatever that was, but be entertained by what it is that I do. I did have a show that did have an emphasis and did have a point. And that show was called Telepathy. And in that show, the whole first half of the show was about what famous people had thought telepathy was, and really pushing it in the area of spirits and that there's spirits around. They pluck thoughts out of us, they put them into other people, the spirit cabinet, and all these things, and talking to the dead. And in that show, I really played it hard in that first half, like I was a genuine psychic. I even did something that I despise. I think it's horrible that spiritualists do this. But I talked to their dead relatives. Now, I was very careful not to change anybody's thoughts about what they already thought about that dead person. I just fed back information to them, like, think of where you went on vacation with them, and I would just tell them that from the spirit telling me these things. But I would have people in tears. And then the second half of the show, that was me coming out at the beginning as if I'm real again, but then giving it a twist and talking about the spiritualists and the mediums being scum. Why can I say that? Now I give my life story, right? About how I've exposed fakes and frauds through the years. And we got feedback from people. We had special ways of getting feedback. And there were a lot of interesting things that came out. And typically, like there was this one girl. She said, she emailed us and she said, hey, I just want to let you know, me and my mom don't talk about psychic phenomena. She believes in it. I don't believe in it. And every time we talk about it, we get in a fight and we don't talk for weeks because it gets so bad. Because I think she's an idiot and she thinks I'm an idiot when it comes to it. It just gets way too personal. But we came to your show. She asked me to come. We drove 2.5 hours to get there. We saw your show. In the first half of the show, I started to feel bad because I started to believe in what you were doing. It was so convincing that I thought I was wrong this whole time and my mom was right. We got into the lobby. My mom even said, "See, I told you." And she said, I told my mom, "Yeah, you're right." And then when we came back in the second half and you told us it was all BS, we now had major all we did was talk about your show on the way home. We've had major conversations about this, and neither one of us get angry because now we understand where the other person was coming from. And that was the whole point of that show. If I try to tell somebody psychic phenomena isn't real, they're going to say, "Yeah, but there was this one psychic I saw," and they're going off this an emotional response. And that's why that first half of the show, I had to come out like I was a genuine psychic, because I had to give them that emotional feeling like they've just seen a genuine psychic. Now, when I'm in that position, I can now come and explain to them that this stuff isn't real. And one more thing on that, disclaimers, and then we'll move on. When I was doing this back in the day, a lot of magicians, mentalists would say that, you would, if you were doing a play Macbeth, you wouldn't stop in the middle and go, "Oh, hold on, people, I'm just an actor, playing the part of Macbeth." They said, "So therefore, you shouldn't be telling people in your art, disclaimers in your show that you're not real." And well, that's a really bad analogy, because when you come to see a play, it's a play. When you come to see a mentalist, you don't know, sometimes people don't know what they're seeing, right? If there was a professor on stage, a neuroscientist, who was talking about the human brain and showing diagrams of things, you very quickly go, on that same stage, you go, "Okay, that's a genuine neuroscientist." Whereas with a mentalist, same thing. You might go, "That's a genuine psychic." So I do think we have a responsibility to let our audiences know that this is strictly entertainment. And then within the confines of the moments and the performances itself, you can pretend like you're real. You can act like you're real in those moments because you are a performer. It's a performance. But I do think it's important for us to remind our audiences, whether it's in interviews or whatever it might be, that, hey, we're not psychic. Did
And
I
as
answer your
we
question? I don't even know if I answered your question. Sorry. I hope I did.
Yeah, and of course, as we usually do per episode, we ask our viewers on Instagram what questions I'd like to ask them to ask you. And this question was from Becky. She asked, "How do you tell if an audience member is telling the truth or telling a lie?"
Hi, Becky. You really don't know 100%. Sometimes you can tell. There's different clues. It's how they avoid looking at you or how they do look at you. There are certain things you can't always rely on those for a performance. But if I'm doing a lie detector test on stage, usually that person that is holding an object or something is giving a lot of attention to everybody else, watching them, looking at them. That usually I can spot that person and go, "Yeah, that person is the person who's actually holding the object." I'm not going to rely on that. I'm going to have to trick back up as a result. But there are little things like that. But all those things, everybody's different. Some people are nervous. Some people are shy on stage. Some people are autistic and you can't quite tell. Some people, they all have these different things. Unless you have a one-on-one with somebody and you get to know them and you understand their anchor, you understand their body language, it's really, really hard to know if somebody's lying or actually telling the truth. It's more going to be a one-on-one thing.
And this question was from Florence. "How was your experience lecturing and performing at the Black Magic Convention?"
It was fantastic, Lawrence. Had a great time. The hardest part is when you are performing and you are lecturing. I was doing two shows and two lectures, and I'm getting ready for the show, so I have very little time to socialize because I'm doing that, and also because I'm coming from the United States over to the UK. I've got jet lag on top of all that, and I'm usually working on very little sleep or trying to get sleep in between shows or before shows or after shows and that, because I haven't had any sleep and my brain is just running 1,000 miles a minute.
And of course, one final question. Where can people buy tickets to your amazing show?
Wish I could tell you that. I had a residency in Vegas, like I said, for 3.5 years. I've closed that. I'm now traveling around the world. I was just in Rome. I was in Hawaii a week later. I'm all over the place. I'm working cruise ships. Best thing to do is go look at my website, Banachek.com, and everything can be on there. You can also find me on Instagram. I do stupid dad jokes and stuff like that. I like to have a little bit of fun. People say, "You need to be more mature." And I'm like, no, I'm never going to grow up. I just want to enjoy life.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
No, thank you. You did a fantastic job. Very professional. I don't know what I expected. So you are amazing, my friend.
Thank you, and thank you for watching this episode of the podcast. Thank you, and goodbye.